Hi there. This is a book that's more than just travel writing. It's a book that's a spiritual adventure. And it's written by Madame Blavatsky, and for some reason I'm intrigued by her. This is a book that takes you into the heart of India, which has always been a land of mystery, wonder, and ancient wisdom. And in this book, we see a world rarely seen with Western eyes, a world of sacred temples and dense forests, Himalayan retreats, and even encounters with sages. And I hope you enjoy it. From the Caves and Jungles of Hindostan, Chapter 1, in Bombay. Late in the evening of the 16th of February, 1879, after a rough voyage which lasted 32 days, joyful exclamations were heard everywhere on deck. "Have you seen the lighthouse?" "There it is at last, the Bombay lighthouse." Cards, books, music, everything was forgotten. Everyone rushed on deck. The moon had not risen yet, and in spite of the starry tropical sky, it was quite dark. The stars were so bright that at first it seemed hardly possible to distinguish far away amongst them a small fiery point lit by earthly hands. The stars winked at us like so many huge eyes in the black sky, on one side of which shone the Southern Cross. At last we distinguished the lighthouse on the distant horizon. It was nothing but a tiny fiery point, diving in the phosphorescent waves. The tired travelers greeted it warmly. The rejoicing was general. What a glorious daybreak followed this dark night. The sea no longer tossed our ship under the skilled guidance of the pilot who had just arrived and whose bronze form was so sharply defined against that pale sky. Our steamer, breathing heavily with its broken machinery, slipped over the quiet, transparent waters of the Indian Ocean, straight into the harbor. We were only 4 miles from Bombay, and to us, who had traveled only a few weeks ago in the Bay of Biscay, which had been so glorified by so many poets and so heartily cursed by all sailors, our surroundings simply seemed a magical dream. After the tropical nights of the Red Sea and the scorching hot days that had tortured us since Aden, we, people of the distant north, now experienced something strange and unwanted, as if the very fresh, soft air had cast its spell over us. There was not a cloud in the sky, thickly strewn with dying stars. Even the moonlight, which till then had covered the sky with its silvery garb, was gradually vanishing, and the brighter grew the rosiness of dawn over the small island that lay before us in the east. The paler in the west grew the scattered rays of the moon that sprinkled with bright flakes of light the dark wake of our ship left behind her, as if the glory of the west was bidding goodbye to us, while the light of the east welcomed us, the newcomers from far-off lands. Brighter and bluer grew the sky, swiftly absorbing the remaining pale stars, one after the other, and we felt something touching in this sweet dignity in which the Queen of Night resigned her rights to the powerful usurper. At last, descending lower and lower, she disappeared completely, and suddenly, almost without interval between the darkness and light, the red-hot globe emerging on the opposite side from under the cape leaned his golden chin on the lower rocks of the island and seemed to stop for a while, as if examining us. Then, with one powerful effort, the torch of the day rose high over the sea and gloriously proceeded on its way including in one mighty fiery embrace the blue waters of the bay, the shore, and the islands with their rocks and coconut forests. His golden rays fell upon a cloud of Parsis, his rightful worshippers, who stood on shore raising their arms toward the mighty eye of Ormuzd. The sight was so impressive that everyone on deck became silent for a moment. Even a red-nosed old sailor who was busy quite close to us over the cable stopped working and, clearing his throat, nodded at the sun. Moving slowly and cautiously along the charming but treacherous bay, we had plenty of time to admire the picture around us. On the right was a group of islands, with Garipuri on Elephanta, with its ancient temple at their head. Garipuri, translated, means the town of caves, according to the Orientalists, and the town of purification, according to the native Sanskrit scholars. This temple, cut out by an unknown hand in the very heart of a rock, resembling porphyry, is a true apple of discord among the archaeologists, of whom none can yet fix, even approximately, its antiquity. Elephante raises high above the rocky brow, all overgrown with secular cactus, and right under it, at the foot of the rock, are hollowed out the chief temple and the two lateral ones. Like the serpent of our Russian fairy tales, it seems to be opening its fierce black mouth to swallow the daring mortal who comes to take possession of the secret mystery of Titan. Its two remaining teeth, dark with time, are formed by two huge pillars at the entrance, sustaining the palate of the monster. How many generations of Hindus, how many races have knelt in the dust before the Trimurti, your threefold deity, O Elephanta? How many centuries were spent by weak man in digging out your stone bosom, this town of temples, and carving your gigantic idols? Who can say? Many years have elapsed since I saw you last. Ancient, mysterious temple, and still the same restless thoughts, the same recurrent questions vex me now as they did then, and still remain unanswered. In a few days we shall see each other again. Once more I shall gaze upon your stern image, upon the three huge granite faces, and shall feel as hopeless as ever of piercing the mystery of your being. This secret fell into safe hands 3 centuries before ours. It is not in vain that the old Portuguese historian Don Diego de Cuta boasts the big square stone fastened over the arch of the pagoda with a distinct inscription having been torn out and sent as a present to King Don Juan III, disappeared mysteriously in the course of time. And adds further, close to this big pagoda there stood another, and farther on even a third, the most wonderful of all in beauty, incredible size and richness of material. All these pagodas and caves have been built by the kings of Kannada, the most important of whom was Bonazur, and these buildings of Satan our Portuguese soldiers attacked with such vehemence that in a few years one stone was not left upon another. And worst of all, they left no inscriptions that might have given a clue to so much. Thanks to the fanaticism of Portuguese soldiers, the chronology of the Indian cave temples must remain forever an enigma to the archaeological world, beginning with the Brahmins, who say Elephanta is 374,000 years old, and ending with Ferguson, who tries to prove that it was carved only in the 12th century of our era. Whenever one turns one's eyes to history, there is nothing to be found but hypotheses and darkness. And yet, Gauripura is mentioned in the epic Mahabharata, Mahabharata, which was written, according to Colebrook and Wilson, a good while before the reign of Cyrus. In another ancient legend, it was said that the temple of Trimurti was built on Elephanta by the sons of Pandu, who took part in the war between the dynasties of the sun and the moon, and belonging to the latter were expelled at the end of the war. The Rajputs, who are the descendants of the first, still sing of this victory, but even in their popular songs, there is nothing positive. Centuries have passed and will pass, and the ancient secret will die in the rocky bosom of the cave, still unrecorded. On the left side of the bay, exactly opposite Elephanta, and as if in contrast with all its antiquity and greatness, spreads the Malabar Hill, the residence of the modern Europeans and rich natives. Their brightly painted bungalows are bathed in the greenery of banyan, Indian fig, and various other trees, and the tall and straight trunks of coconut palms cover the fringe of their leaves, the whole ridge of the hilly headland. There, on the southwestern end of the rock, you see the almost transparent, lace-like government house, surrounded on three sides by the ocean. This is the coolest and most comfortable part of Bombay, fanned by three different sea breezes. The island of Bombay, designated by the natives Mumbai, received its name from the goddess Mamba in Maharati Mahima, or Amba, Mamba, and Ama, according to the dialect, a word meaning literally the Great Mother. Hardly 100 years ago, on the site of this modern esplanade, there stood a temple consecrated to Mamba Devi. With great difficulty and expense, they carried it nearer to the shore, closer to the fort, and erected it in front of Balswara, the Lord of the Innocent, one of the names of the god Shiva. Bombay is part of a considerable group of islands, the most remarkable of which are Salsetta, joined to Bombay by a mole, Elephanta, so named by the Portuguese because of a huge rock cut in the shape of an elephant, 35 feet long, and Trombay, whose lovely rocks rise 900 feet above the surface of the sea. Bombay looks on maps like an enormous crayfish and is at the head of the rest of the islands, spreading far out into the sea. Its two claws, Bombay Island, stands like a sleepless guardian watching over his younger brothers. Between it and the continent, there is a narrow arm of a river which gets gradually broader and then again narrower, deeply indenting the sides of both shores, so forming a haven that has no equal in the world. It was not without reason that the Portuguese, expelled in the course of time by the English, used to call it Buena Bahia. In a fit of tourist exaltation, some travelers have compared it to the Bay of Naples, but as a matter of fact, the one is as much like the other as a Lazzaroni is like a coulee. The whole resemblance between the former consists in the fact that there is water in both. In Bombay, as well as in its harbor, everything is original. It does not in the least remind one of southern Europe. Look at those coasting vessels and the native boats. Both are built in the likeness of the seabird, sat, S-A-T, a kind of kingfisher. When in motion, these boats are the personification of grace, with their long prows and rounded poops. They look as if they were gliding backwards, and one might mistake for the wings the strangely shaped long lateen sails, their narrow angles fastened upward to a yard, filling these two wings with wind and careening so almost as if to touch the surface of the water. These boats will fly along with astonishing swiftness. Unlike our European boats, they do not cut the waves, but glide over them like a seagull. The surroundings of the bay transported us to some fairyland of the Arabian Nights. The ridge of the Western Ghats, cut through here and there by some separate hills almost as high as themselves, stretched all along the eastern shore. From the base of their fantastic rocky tops, they are all overgrown with impenetrable forests and jungles inhabited by wild animals. Every rock has been enriched by the popular imagination with an independent legend. All over the slope, the mountains are scattered. The pagodas, mosques, and temples of numberless sects. Here and there, the hot rays of the sun strike upon the old fortress, once dreadful and inaccessible, now half ruined and covered with prickly cacti. At every step, some memorial of sanctity. Here, a deep vihara, V-I-H-A-R-A, vihara, a cave cell of a Buddhist, a bhikshu saint. There, a rock protected by a symbol of Shiva. Further on, a Jaina temple or a holy tank, all covered with the sedge and filled with water, once blessed by a Brahmin, and able to purify every sin, an indispensable attribute of all pagodas. All the surroundings are covered with symbols of gods and goddesses. Each of the 330 millions of deities of the Hindu pantheon has its representative in something consecrated to it, a stone, a flower, a tree, or a bird. On the west side of the Malabar Hill peeps through the trees Balakeshvara, the temple of the Lord of Sand. A long stream of Hindus moves towards the celebrated temple, men and women shining with rings on their fingers and toes, with bracelets from the wrists up to their elbows, clad in bright turbans and snow-white muslins, and foreheads freshly painted with red, yellow, and white, holy sectarian signs. The legend says that Rama spent here a night on his way from Ayodhya, Ayodhya, to Lanka, Ceylon, to fetch his wife Sita, Sita, who had been stolen by the wicked king Ravana. Rama's brother, Lakshman, whose duty it was to send him daily a new lingam from Benares, was late in doing so one evening. Losing patience, Rama erected for himself a lingam of sand. When at last the symbol arrived from Benares, it was put in a temple, and the lingam erected by Rama was left on the shore. There it stayed during long centuries, but at the arrival of the Portuguese, the Lord of Sand felt so disgusted with the Ferengi, foreigners, that he jumped into the sea never to return. A little farther on, there was a charming tank called Vanatira, and the point of the arrow, or the point of the arrow. Here, Rama, the much worshipped hero of the Hindus, felt thirsty, and not finding any water, shot an arrow, and immediately there was created a pond. Its crystal waters were surrounded by a high wall. Steps were built leading down into it, and a circle of white marble dwellings was filled with Dvija, in brackets, twice-born Brahmins. India is the land of legends and mysterious nooks and corners. There is not a ruin, not a monument, not a thicket that has no story attached to it. Yet, however they may be entangled in the cobweb of popular imagination, when it becomes thicker with every generation, which becomes thicker with every generation, it is difficult to point out a single one that is not founded on fact. With patience, and still more with the help of the learned Brahmins, you can always get at the truth, when once you have secured their trust and friendship. The same roads lead to the temple of the Parsi fire worshippers. At its altar burns an unquenchable fire, which daily consumes hundredweights of sandalwood and aromatic herbs. Lit 300 years ago, the sacred fire has never been extinguished, notwithstanding many disorders, sectarian discords, and even wars. The Parsis are very proud of this temple of Zarathustra, as they call Zoroaster. Compared with it, the Hindu pagodas look like brightly painted Easter eggs. Generally, they are consecrated to Hanuman, the monkey god, the faithful ally of Rama, or to the elephant-headed Ganesha, the god of the occult wisdom, or to one of the Devis, Devis, D-E-V-I-S. You meet with these temples in every street. Before each there is a row of peoples, P-I-P-A-L. In brackets it says Ficus religiosa, R-E-L-I-G-I-O-S-A, centuries old, which no temple can disperse with, because these trees are the abode of the elementals and the sinful souls. All this is entangled and mixed and scattered, appearing to one's eye like a picture in a dream. 30 centuries have left their traces here. The innate laziness and the long conservative tendencies of the Hindus, even before the European invasion, preserved all kinds of monuments from the ruinous vengeance of the fanatics, whether those memorials were Buddhist or belonged to some other unpopular sect. The Hindus are not naturally given to senseless vandalism, and a phrenologist would vainly look for a bump of destructiveness on their skulls. If you meet with antiquities that, having been spared by time, are nowadays either destroyed or disfigured, it is not they who are to blame, but either Mussulmans or the Portuguese under the guidance of the Jesuits. At last we were anchored, and in a moment were besieged ourselves, as well as our luggage, by numbers of naked skeleton-like Hindis, Parsis, Moguls, and various other tribes. All this crowd emerged as if from the bottom of the sea, and they began to shout, to chatter, and to yell, as only the tribes of Asia can, to get rid of this babel, confusion of tongues. As soon as possible, we took refuge in the first bunger boat and made for the shore. Once settled in the bungalow awaiting us, the first thing we were struck with in Bombay was the millions of crows and vultures. The first are, so to speak, the county council of the town, whose duty it is to clean the streets and to kill one of them is not only forbidden by the police, but would be very dangerous. By killing one, you would also rouse the vengeance of every Hindu who is always ready to offer his own life in exchange for a crow's. The souls of the sinful forefathers transmigrate into crows, and to kill one is to interfere with the law of karma and to expose the poor ancestor to something still worse. Such is the firm belief not only of Hindus, but of Parsis, even the most enlightened among us. The strange behavior of the Indian crows explains to a certain extent this superstition. The vultures are, in a way, the grave diggers of the Parsis, and are under the personal protection of the Farvardhanya, the angel of death, who soars over the Tower of Silence, watching the occupations of the feathered workmen. The deafening caw of the crows strikes every newcomer as uncanny, but after a while it's explained very simply. Every tree of the numerous coconut forests around Bombay is provided with a hollow pumpkin. The sap of the tree drops into it, and after fermenting becomes a most intoxicating beverage, known in Bombay under the name of toddy. The naked toddy wallahs, generally half-caste Portuguese, modestly adorned with a single coral necklace, fetch this beverage twice a day, climbing the 150 feet high trunks like squirrels. The crows mostly build their nests on the tops of the coconut trees and drink incessantly out of the open pumpkins. The result of this is the chronic intoxication of the birds. As soon as we went out in the garden of our new habitation, flocks of crows came down heavily from every tree. The noise they make whilst jumping about everywhere is indescribable. There seemed to be something positively human in the positions of the slyly bent heads of the drunken birds, and a fiendish light shone in their eyes while they were examining us from head to foot. And that concludes the first part of this chapter. I hope you're enjoying it. I am. So, till soon. From the Caves and Jungles of Hindustan by Madame Blavatsky. We occupied 3 small bungalows, lost like nests in the garden, their roofs literally smothered in roses, blooming on bushes 20 feet high, and their windows covered only with muslin instead of the usual panes of glass. The bungalows were situated in the native part of the town, so that we were transported all at once into the real India. We were living in India, unlike English people who are only surrounded by India at a certain distance. We were enabled to study her character and customs, her religion, superstitions and rites, to learn her legends, in fact, to live among Hindus. Everything in India, this land of the elephant and the poisonous cobra, of the tiger and the unsuccessful English missionary, is original and strange. Everything seems unusual, unexpected, and striking, even to one who has traveled in Turkey, Egypt, Damascus, and Palestine. In these tropical regions, the conditions of nature are so various that all the forms of the animal and vegetable kingdoms must radically differ from what we are used to in Europe. Look, for instance, at those women on their way to a well through a garden, which is private and at the same time open to anyone because somebody's cows are grazing in it. To whom does it not happen to meet to whom does it not happen to meet with women, to see cows, and admire a garden? Doubtless these are among the commonest of all things, but a single attentive glance will suffice to show you the difference that exists between the same objects in Europe and India. Nowhere more than in India does a human being feel his weakness and insignificance. The majesty of the tropical growth is such that our highest trees would look dwarfed compared with banyans and especially with palms. A European cow, mistaking at first glance her Indian sister for a calf, would deny the existence of any kinship between them, as neither a mouse-colored wool nor the straight goat-like horns, nor the humped back of the latter would permit her to make such an error. As to the women, each of them would make an artist feel enthusiastic about the gracefulness of her movements and drapery, but still, no pink and white, stout Anna Ivanova would condescend to greet her. Such a shame, God forgive me. The woman is entirely naked. This opinion of modern Russian women is nothing but the echo of what was said in 1470 by a distinguished Russian traveler, the sinful slave of God, Anastasius, son of Nikita from Tiver, as he styles himself. He describes India as follows: "This is the land of India. Its people are naked, never cover their heads, and wear their hair braided. Women have babies every year. Men and women are black. Their prince wears a veil around his head and wraps another veil around his legs. The noblemen wear a veil on one shoulder, and the noble women on the shoulders and round the loins. But everyone is barefooted. The women walk about with their hair spread and their breasts naked. The children, boys and girls, never cover their shame until they are 7 years old." This description is quite correct. But Athanasius, Nikita's son, is right only concerning the lowest and poorest classes. These really do walk about covered only with the veil, which often is so poor that in fact it is nothing but a rag. But still, even the poorest woman is clad in a piece of muslin at least 10 yards long. One end serves as a short petticoat, and the other covers the head and the shoulders when out in the street, though the faces are always uncovered. The hair is erected into a kind of Greek chignon. The legs up to the knees, the arms and the waist are never covered. There is not a single respectable woman who would consent to put on a pair of shoes. Shoes are the attribute and prerogative of disrespectable women. When some time ago the wife of the Madras governor thought of passing a law that should induce native women to cover their breasts, the place was actually threatened with a revolution. A kind of jacket is worn only by dancing girls. The government recognized that it would be unreasonable to irritate women, who very often are more dangerous than their husbands and brothers, and the custom, based on the law of Manu and sanctified by 3,000 years' observance, remained unchanged. For more than 2 years before we left America, we were in constant correspondence with a certain learned Brahmin, whose glory is great at present. And then it says in brackets 1879, all over India. We came to India to study under his guidance the ancient country of Aryas, the Vedas, and their difficult language. His name is Dayanand Saraswati Swami, Swami is the name of the learned anchorites who are initiated into many of the mysteries unattainable by common mortals. They are monks who never marry, but they are quite different from other mendicant brotherhoods, the so-called Sannyasi and Hossein, Hossein. The Pandit, Pandit, is considered the greatest Sanskritist of modern India and is an absolute enigma to everyone. It is only 5 years since he appeared on the arena of the great reforms, but till then he lived entirely secluded in a jungle like the ancient gymnosophists mentioned by the Greek and Latin authors. At this time he was studying the chief philosophical systems of the Aryavarta, Aryavatta, and the occult meaning of the Vedas with the help of mystics and anchorites. All Hindus believe that on the Badrinath mountains, 22,000 feet above the level of the sea, there exist spacious caves inhabited now for many thousands of years by these anchorites. Badrinath is situated in the north of Hindustan on the river Bishegunj, Bishegunj, and is celebrated for its temple of Vishnu, right in the heart of the town. Inside the temple there are hot mineral springs visited yearly by about 50,000 pilgrims who come to be purified by them. From the first day of his appearance, Dayanand Saraswati produced the immense impression and got the surname of the Luther of India, in quotes, the Luther of India, wandering from one town to another, today in the south, tomorrow in the north, and transporting himself from one end of the country to another with incredible quickness. He has visited every part of India, from Cape Comorin to the Himalayas, and from Calcutta to Bombay. He preaches the one deity, and Vedas in hand proves that in the ancient writings there was not a word that could justify polytheism. Thundering against idol worship, the great orator fights with all his might against caste, infant marriages, and superstitions, chastising all the evils grafted on India by centuries of casuistry. Casuistry, and false interpretations of the Vedas. He blames for them the Brahmins, who he openly says before the masses of the people are alone guilty of the humiliation of their country, once great and independent, now fallen and enslaved. And yet Great Britain has in him not an enemy, but rather an ally. He says openly, if you expel the British, the English, then no later than tomorrow, you and I and everyone who rises against idol worship will have our throats cut like mere sheep. The Mussulmans are stronger than the idol worshippers, but these last are stronger than we. The Pandit held many a warm dispute with the Brahmins, whose treacherous enemies of the people, and has almost always been victorious. In Benares, secret assassins were hired to slay him, but the attempt did not succeed. In a small town in Bengal, where he treated fetishism with more than his usual severity, some fanatic threw on his naked feet a huge cobra. There are two snakes, deified by the Brahmin mythology. The one which surrounds the neck of Shiva on his idols is called Vasuki, Vasuki. The other, Ananta, forms the couch of Vishnu. So the worshipper of Shiva, feeling sure that his cobra, trained purposely for the mysteries of a Shivati pagoda, would at once make an end of the offender's life, triumphantly exclaimed, "Let the god Vasuki himself show which of us is right." Dayanand jerked off the cobra, twirling around his leg, and with a single vigorous movement crushed the reptile's head. "Let him do so," he quietly assented. "Your God has been too slow. It is I who have decided the dispute. Now go," added he, addressing the crowd, "and tell everyone how easily perish the false gods." Thanks to his excellent knowledge of Sanskrit, the Pandit does a great service not only to the masses, clearing their ignorance about the monotheism of the Vedas, but to the science also, showing who exactly are the Brahmins, the only caste in India which during centuries had the right to study Sanskrit literature and comment on the Vedas, and which used this right solely for its own advantage. Long before the time of such Orientalists as Burnouf, Burnouf, Burnouf Colebrook, and Max Müller, there have been in India many reformers who tried to prove the pure monotheism of the Vedic doctrines. There have even been founders of the new religions who denied the revelations of these scriptures. For instance, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, and after him Babu Keshub Chunder Sen, both Calcutta Bengalis, but neither of them had much success. They did nothing but add new denominations to the numberless sects existing in India. Ram Mohan Roy died in England, having done next to nothing, and for Keshub Chunder Sen, having founded the community of Brahmo Samaj, which professes a religion extracted from the depths of Babu's own imagination, became a mystic of the most pronounced type, and now is only a berry from the same field, as we say in Russia, a berry from the same field, in quotes, as we say in Russia, as the spiritualist by whom he considered to be a medium and a Calcutta Swedenborg, a Calcutta Swedenborg. He spends his time in a dirty tank singing praises to Chaitanya, Quran, Buddha, and his own person, proclaiming himself their prophet, and performs a mystical dance dressed in woman's attire, which on his part is an attention to the woman goddess, whom the Babu calls his mother, father, and eldest brother. In short, all the attempts to re-establish the pure, primitive monotheism of Aryan India have been a failure. They always got wrecked upon the double rock of Brahmanism and of prejudices centuries old. But lo, here appears unexpectedly the Pandit Dayanand. None, even of the most beloved of his disciples, knows who he is and whence he comes. He openly confesses before the crowds that the name under which he is known is not his, but was given to him in the yogi initiation. The mystical school of yogis was established by Patanjali. Patanjali, the founder of one of the 6 philosophical systems of ancient Egypt. It is supposed that the Neoplatonic Platonists of the second and third Alexandrian schools were the followers of Indian yogis. More especially was their theurgy brought from India by Pythagoras, according to the tradition. There still exist in India hundreds of yogis who follow the system of Panajali and assert that they are in communion with the Brahma. Nevertheless, most of these are do-nothings, mendicants by professionals, and great frauds thanks to the insatiable longing of the natives for miracles. The great yogis avoid appearing in public and spend their lives in secluded retirement and studies, except when, as in Dayanand's case, they come forth in time of need to aid their country. However, it is perfectly certain that India never saw a more learned Sanskrit scholar, a deeper metaphysician, a more wonderful orator, and a more fearless denunciator of every evil than Dayanand since the time of Sankaracharya, the celebrated founder of the Vedanta philosophy, the most metaphysical of Indian systems, in fact, the crown of pantheistic teaching. Then Dayanand's personal appearance is striking. He is immensely tall. His complexion is pale, rather European than Indian. His eyes are large and bright, and his grayish hair is long. The yogis and dikshatas, in brackets, initiated, never cut either their hair or beard. His voice is clear and loud, well calculated to give expression to every shade of deep feeling, ranging from a sweet childish caressing whisper to thundering wrath against the evil doings and falsehood of the priests. All this taken together produces an indescribable effect on the impressionable Hindu. Wherever Dayanand appears, crowds prostrate themselves in the dust over his footprints. But unlike Babu Kashub Chunder Sen, he does not teach them a new religion, does not invent new dogmas. He only asks them to renew their half-forgotten Sanskrit studies, and having compared the doctrines of their forefathers with what they have become in the hands of Brahmins, to return to the pure conceptions of deity taught by the primitive rishis, Agni, Vayu, Aditya, and Angira, the patriarchs who first gave the Vedas to humanity. He does not even claim that the Vedas are a heavenly revelation, but simply teaches that every word in these scriptures belongs to the highest inspiration that is repeated in the history of humanity, and when necessary may happen to any nation. During his 5 years of work, Swami Dayanand made about 2 million proselytes, chiefly among the higher castes. Judging by appearances, they are all ready to sacrifice to him their lives and souls, and even their earthly possessions, which are often more precious to them than their lives. But Dayanand is a real yogi. He never touches money and despises pecuniary affairs. He contents himself with a few handful of rice per day. One is inclined to think that this wonderful Hindu bears a charmed life. So careless is he of rousing the worst human passions, which are so dangerous in India. A marble statue could not be less moved by the raging wrath of the crowd. We saw him once at work. He sent away all his faithful followers and forbade them either to watch over him or defend him, and stood alone before the infuriated crowd, facing calmly the monster ready to spring upon him and tear him to pieces. Here a short explanation is necessary. A few years ago, a society of well-informed, energetic people was formed in New York. A certain sharp-witted savant surnamed them, oh, this is in French, I'll do my best to try to read it here, La Société des Malcontents du Spiritisme. All right, let me spell this. L-A-S-O-C-I-E-T-E with the accent acute over both E's. D-E-S-M-A-L-C-O-N-T-E-N-T-S D-U-S-P-I-R-I-T-I-S-M-E. This is, I would translate it, the Society of Malcontents of Spiritism. I don't know if that's the correct translation, though. Okay, so a certain sharp-witted savant surnamed this society, the Society of Malcontents of Spiritism. The founders of this club were people who, believing in the phenomena of spiritism, were, as much as in the possibility of every other phenomenon in nature, still denied the theory of the spirits in quotes. They considered that the modern psychology was a science still in the first stages of its development, in total ignorance of the nature of the psychic man, and denying, as do many other sciences, all that cannot be explained according to their own particular theories. From the first days of its existence, some of the most learned Americans joined the society, which became known as the Theosophical Society. Oh, interesting. Its members. Okay, so it was called the Society of Malcontents of Spiritism, which later became the Theosophical Society. Oh my, that's just my own observation. Okay, this has nothing to do with what Madame Blavatsky is saying here. Okay, let me just start that sentence again. Okay, from the first days of its existence, some of the most learned Americans joined the society, which became known as the Theosophical Society. Its members differed on many points, much as do the members of any other society, geographically or archaeological, which fights for years over the sources of the Nile or the hieroglyphs of Egypt. But everyone is unanimously agreed that as long as there is water in the Nile, its sources must exist somewhere. So much about the phenomena of spiritualism and mesmerism. These phenomena were still waiting their Champollion, but the Rosetta Stone was to be searched for neither in Europe nor in America, excuse me, but in the faraway countries where they still believe in magic, where wonders are performed daily by the native priesthood, and where the cold materialism of science has never yet reached, in one word, in the East. The council of the society knew that the Lama-Buddhists, for instance, though not believing in God and denying the personal immortality of the soul, are yet celebrated for their phenomena, and that mesmerism was known and daily practiced in China from time immemorial under the name of Gina or Gina, G-I-N-A. In India, they fear and hate the very name of the spirits, whom the spiritualists venerate so deeply. Yet, many an ignorant fakir can perform miracles calculated to turn upside down all the notions of a scientist and to be the despair of the most celebrated European prestidignateurs. Many members of the society have visited India. Many were born there and have themselves witnessed the sorceries of the Brahmins, The founders of the club, well aware of the depth of modern ignorance in regard to the spiritual man, were most anxious that Cuvier's, C-U-V-I-E-R, Cuvier's method of comparative anatomy should acquire rights of citizenship among metaphysicians and so progress from regions physical to regions psychological on their own inductive and deductive foundation. Otherwise, they thought, psychology will be unable to move forward a single step and may even obstruct every other branch of natural history. Instances have not been wanting of physiology poaching on the preserves of the purely metaphysical and abstract knowledge, all the time feigning to ignore the latter absolutely and seeking to class psychology with the positive sciences, having first bounded to a bed of Procrustes, P-R-O-C Crustes, P-R-O-C-R-U-S-T-E-S, where it refuses to yield its secrets to clumsy tormentors. In a short time, the Theosophical Society counted its members not only by hundreds, but by thousands. All the malcontents of American spiritualism, and there were at that time 12 million spiritualists in America, joined the society. Collateral branches were formed in London, Corfu, Australia, Spain, Cuba, California, etc. Everywhere experiments were being performed, and the conviction that it was not spirits alone who are the cause of the phenomena was becoming general. In course of time, branches of the society were formed in India and Ceylon. The Buddhist and Brahmanical members became more numerous than the Europeans. A league was formed, and to the name of the society was added the subtitle, The Brotherhood of Humanity. After an active correspondence between the Arya Samaj, founded by Swami Dayanand, and the Theosophical Society, an amalgamation was arranged between the two bodies. Then the Chief Council of the New York branch decided upon sending a special delegation to India for the purpose of studying on the spot the ancient language of the Vedas and the manuscripts and the wonders of yogism. On the 17th of December, 1878, the delegation, composed of 2 secretaries and 2 members of the Council of the Theosophical Society, started from New York to pause for a while in London and then proceed to Bombay, where it landed in February 1879. It may easily be conceived that, under these circumstances, the members of the delegation were better able to study the country and to make fruitful researches than might otherwise have been the case. Today they are looked upon as brothers and aided by the most influential natives of India. They count among the members of their society pandits of Benares and Calcutta, and Buddhist priests of Ceylon, among others the learned Sumagala, mentioned by Minayeff, M-I-N-A-Y-E-F-F, in the description of his visit to Adam's Peak, and lamas of Tibet, Burma, Travancore, and elsewhere. The members of the delegations are admitted to sanctuaries where as yet no European has yet set foot. Consequently, they may hope to render many services to humanity and science in spite of the ill will which the representatives of positive science bear to them. As soon as the delegation landed, a telegram was dispatched to Dayanand, as everyone was anxious to make his personal acquaintance. In reply, he said that he was obliged to go immediately to Hardwar, where hundreds of thousands of pilgrims were expected to assemble, but he insisted on our remaining behind, since cholera was certain to break out among the devotees. He appointed a certain spot at the foot of the Himalayas in the Punjab, where we were to meet in a month's time. Alas, all this was written some time ago. Since then, Swami Dayanand's countenance has changed completely toward us. He is now an enemy of the Theosophical Society and its two founders, Colonel Olcott and the author of these letters. It appeared that on entering into an offensive and defensive alliance with the Society, Dayanand nourished the hope that all its members, Christians, Brahmins, and Buddhists, would acknowledge his supremacy and become members of the Arya Samaj. Needless to say, this was impossible. The Theosophical Society rests on the principle of complete non-interference with the religious beliefs of its members. Toleration is the basis, and its aims are purely philosophical. This did not suit Dayanand. He wanted all the members either to become his disciples or to be expelled from the society. It was quite clear that neither the president nor the council would assent to such a claim. Englishmen and Americans, whether they were Christians or freethinkers, Buddhists, and especially Brahmins, revolted against Dayanand and unanimously demanded that the league should be broken. However, all this happened later. At the time of which I speak, we were friends and allies of the Swami, and we learned with deep interest that the Hardwar Mela, and Mela's in quotes, M-E-L-A, which he was to visit and takes place every 12 years, and is a kind of religious fair which attracts representatives from all the numerous sects in India. Learned dissertations are read by the disputants in defense of their peculiar doctrines, and the debates are held in public. This year, the Hardwar gathering was exceptionally numerous. The sannyasis, the mendicant monks of India, alone numbered 35,000. And the cholera foreseen by the Swami actually broke out. As we were not yet to start for the appointed meeting, we had plenty of spare time before us, so we proceeded to examine Bombay. The Tower of Silence on the heights of the Malabar Hill is the last abode of all the sons of Zoroaster. It is, in fact, a Parsi cemetery. Here their dead, rich and poor men and women and children are all laid in a row, and in a few minutes nothing remains of them but bare skeletons. A dismal impression is made upon a foreigner by these towers, where absolute silence has reigned for centuries. This kind of building is very common in every place where Parsis live and die. In Bombay, of 6 towers, the largest was built 250 years ago, and the least but a short time since. With few exceptions, they are round or square in shape, from 20 to 40 feet high, without a roof, window, or door, but with a single iron gate opening towards the east, and so small that it is quite covered by a few bushes. The first corpse brought to the new tower, Dakhma, D-A-K-H-M-A, must be the body of the innocent child of a mobed or priest, of a mobed, M-O-B-E-D, or priest. No one, not even a chief watcher, is allowed to approach within a distance of 30 paces of these towers. Of all living human beings, Nassalars, and this word is in quotes, N-A-S-S-E-S-A-L-A-R-S, corpse carriers alone enter and leave the Tower of silence. The life these men lead is simply wretched. No European executioner's position could be worse. They live quite apart from the rest of the world, in whose eyes they are the most abject of beings. Being forbidden to enter the markets, they must get their food as they can. They are born, marry, and die, perfect strangers to all except their own class, passing through the streets only to fetch the dead and carry them to the tower. Even to be near one of them is a degradation. Entering the tower with a corpse covered, whatever may have been its rank or position, with old white rags, they undress it and place it in silence on one of the 3 rows presently to be described. Then, still preserving the same silence, they come out, shut the gate, and burn the rags. Amongst the fire worshippers, death is divested of all his majesty and is a mere object of disgust. As soon as the last hour of a sick person seems to approach, everyone leaves the chamber of death, as much to avoid impeding the departure of the soul from the body as to shun the risk of polluting the living by contact with the dead. The mobid alone stays with the dying man for a while, and having whispered into his ear the Zend Avesta precepts, Asham, Vohu, and Yato Ahuvari, leaves the room while the patient is still alive. Then a dog is brought and made to look straight into the face. This ceremony is called Sastid, S-A-S-D-I-D. The dog's stare. A dog is the only living creature that the Druxnasu, D-R-U-X-N-A-S-S-U, the evil one, fears, and that is able to prevent him from taking possession of the body. It must be strictly observed that no one's shadow lies between the dying man and the dog, otherwise the whole strength of the dog's gaze will be lost, and the demons will profit by the occasion. The body remains on the spot where life left it until the Nasalars appear, their arms hidden to the shoulders under old bags to take it away. Having deposited it in an iron coffin, the same for everyone, they carry it to the Dakma. If anyone who has been carried thither should happen to regain consciousness, the Nasalars are bound to kill him. For such a person who has been polluted by one touch of dead bodies in the Dakma has thereby lost all right to return to the living. By doing so, he would contaminate the whole community. As some such cases have occurred, the Parsis are trying to get a new law passed that would allow the miserable ex-corpses to live again among their friends, and that would compel the Nasalars to leave the only gate of the Dakma unlocked, so that they might find a way of retreat open to them. It is very curious, but it is said that the vultures which devour without hesitation the corpses will never touch those who are only apparently dead, but fly away uttering loud shrieks. After a last prayer at the gate of the Dakma, pronounced from afar from the Mobid and repeated in chorus by the Nasalars, the dog ceremony is repeated. In Bombay, there is a dog trained for this purpose at the entrance to the tower. Finally, the body is taken inside and placed on one of the other rows according to its sex and age. We have twice been present at the ceremonies of the dying and once of burial. if I may be permitted to use such an incongruous term. In this respect, the Parsis are much more tolerant than the Hindus, who are offended by the mere presence of their religious rites at the religious rites of an European. N. Bariranji, a chief official of the tower, invited us to his house to be present at the burial of some rich woman, so we witnessed all that was going on at a distance of about 40 paces, sitting quietly on our obliging host's veranda. While the dog was staring into the dead woman's face, we were gazing as intently, but with much more disgust, at the huge flock of vultures above the dakma that kept entering the tower and flying out again with pieces of human flesh in their beaks. These birds that build their nests in thousands round the Tower of Silence have been purposely imported from Persia. Indian vultures proved to be too weak and not sufficiently bloodthirsty to perform the process of stripping the bones with the dispatch prescribed by Zoroaster. We were told that the entire operation of denuding the bones occupies no more than a few minutes. As soon as the ceremony was over, we were led into another building where a model of the dakma was to be seen. We could now very easily imagine what was to take place presently inside the tower. In the center, there is a deep waterless well, covered with a grating like an opening into a drain, and around it there are 3 broad circles gradually sloping downward. In each of them are coffin-like receptacles for bodies. There are 365 such places. The first and smallest row is destined for children, the second for women, the third for men. This threefold circle is symbolic of 3 cardinal Zoroastrian virtues: pure thoughts, kind words, and good actions. Thanks to the vultures, the bones are laid bare in less than an hour, and in 2 or 3 weeks, the tropical sun scorches them into such a state of fragility that the slightest breath of wind is enough to reduce them to powder and to carry them down into the pit. No smell is left behind, no source of plagues and epidemics. I do not know that this way may not be preferable to cremation, which leaves in the air about the ghat, G-H-A-T, a faint but disagreeable odor. The ghat is a place by the sea or the seashore where Hindus burn their dead instead of feeding the old Slavonic deity, Mother Wet Earth, with carrion. Parsis give to Armasti pure dust. Armasti means literally fostering cow, and Zoroaster teaches that the cultivation of the land is the noblest of all occupations in the eyes of God, according to the worship of earth. Accordingly, the worship of earth is so sacred among the Parsis that they take all possible precautions against polluting the fostering cow that gives them 100 golden grains for every single grain. In the season of the monsoon, when during 4 months the rain pours incessantly down and washes into the well everything that's left by the vultures, the water absorbed by the earth is filtered for the bottom of the well, the walls of which are built of granite, is to this end covered with sand and charcoal. The sight of the Pinjarapalli is less lugubrious and much more amusing. The Pinjarapala is the Bombay hospital. for decrepit animals. But a similar institution exists in every town where Jainas dwell. Jainas, being one of the most ancient and also most interesting of the sects of India. It is much older than Buddhism, which took its rise about 543 to 477 BC. Jainas boast that Buddhism is nothing more than a mere heresy of Jainism. Gautama, the founder of Buddhism, having been a disciple and follower of one of the Jaina gurus. The customs, rites, and philosophical conception of Jainas place them midway between the Brahmanists and the Buddhists. In view of their social arrangements, they more closely resemble the former. But in their religion, they incline towards the latter. Their caste divisions, their total abstinence from flesh, and their non-worship of the relics of the saints are as strictly observed as the similar tenets of the Brahmins, but unlike Buddhists, they deny the Hindu gods and the authority of the Vedas and adore their own 24 Tirthankaras or Jinas, Jinas, who belong to the host of the blissful. Their priests, like Buddhists, never marry. They live in isolated viharas and choose their successors from amongst the members of any social class. According to them, Prakrit is the only sacred language. Prakrit. Prakrit is the only sacred language and is used in their sacred literature as well as in Ceylon. Jainas and Buddhists have the same traditional chronology. They do not eat after sunset and carefully dust any place before sitting down upon it, that they may not crush even the tiniest of insects. Both systems, or rather both schools of philosophy, teach the theory of eternal, indestructible atoms, following the ancient atomistic school of Kanada, Kanada. They assert that the universe never has a beginning and never will have an end. The world and everything in it is but an illusion, a maya, say the Vedantists, the Buddhists, and the Jainas. But whereas the followers of Sankaracharya preach Parabrahm, a deity devoid of will, understanding, and action, because it is absolute understanding, mind, and will, and Ishvara emanating from it, the Jainas and the Buddhists believe in no creator of the universe, but teach only the existence of Shwabhavati, a plastic, infinite, self-created principle in nature. Still, they firmly believe, as do all Indian sects, in the transmigration of souls. Their fear, lest by killing an animal or an insect, they may perchance destroy the life of an ancestor, develops their love and care for every living creature to an almost incredible extent. Not only is there a hospital for invalid animals in every town and village, but their priests always wear a Muslim muzzle. I trust they will perform the disrespectful expression. Now, let me start that sentence again. Okay. Not only is there a hospital for invalid animals in every town and village, but their priests always wear a muslin muzzle. And then in brackets it says, I trust they will pardon the disrespectful expression. In order to avoid destroying even the smallest animalcule by inadvertence in the act of breathing. Oh my goodness. The same fear impels them to drink only filtered water. There are a few million of Jainas in Gujarat, Gujarat, Bombay, Konkan, and some other places. The Bombay Pinjarapala occupies a whole quarter of the town and is separated into yards, meadows, and gardens, with ponds, cages for beasts of prey, and enclosures for tame animals. This institution would have served very well for a model of Noah's Ark. In the first yard, however, we saw no animals, but instead a few hundred human skeletons, old men, women, and children. They were the remaining natives of the so-called famine district who had crowded into Bombay to beg their bread. Thus, while a few yards off, the official vets, V-E-T-S, in quotes, were busily bandaging the broken legs of jackals, pouring ointments on the backs of mangy dogs, and fitting crutches to lame storks, human beings were dying at the very elbow of starvation. Happily for the famine-stricken, there were at the time fewer hungry animals than usual, and so they were fed on what remained from the meals of the brute pensioners. No doubt many of these wretched sufferers would have consented to transmigrate instantly into the bodies of any of the animals who were ending so snugly their earthly careers. But even the Pinjarapala roses are not without thorns. The graminivores, Graminivores, the graminivores subjects, of course, would not wish for anything better, but I doubt very much whether the beasts of prey, such as tigers, hyenas, and wolves, are content with the rules and forcibly prescribed diet. Jainas themselves turn with disgust even from eggs and fish, and in consequence all the animals of which they have the care must turn vegetarians. We were present when an old tiger, wounded by an English bullet, was fed. Having sniffed at a kind of rice soup which was offered to him, he lashed his tail, snarled, showing his yellow teeth with a weak roar that turned away from the food. What a look he cast askance upon his keeper, who was meekly trying to persuade him to taste his nice dinner. Only the strong bars of the cage saved the Jaina from the vigorous protest on the part of this veteran of the forest. A hyena with bleeding head and an ear half torn off began by sitting in the trough filled with the Spartan sauce, and then, without any further ceremony, upset it as if to show his utter contempt for the mess. The wolves and the dogs raised such disconsolate howls that they attracted the attention of two inseparable friends, an old elephant with a wooden leg and a sore-eyed ox, the veritable Castor and Pollux of this institution. In accordance with his noble nature, the first thought of the elephant concerned his friend. He wound his trunk around the neck of the ox in token of perfection, and both moaned dismally. Parrots, storks, pigeons, flamingos, the whole feathered tribe reveled in their breakfast. Monkeys were the first to answer the keeper's invitation, greatly enjoyed themselves. Further on, we were shown a holy man who was feeding insects with his own blood. He lay with his eyes shut, and the scorching rays of the sun striking full upon his naked body. He was literally covered with flies, mosquitoes, ants, and bugs. "All these are your brothers," mildly observed the keeper, pointing to the hundreds of animals and insects. "How can you Europeans kill and even devour them?" "What would you do," I asked, "if these snakes were about to bite you? Is it possible you would not kill it if you had time?" "Not for all the world. I would cautiously catch it, and then I would carry it to some deserted place outside the town, and there I would set it free. Nevertheless, suppose it bit you. Then I would recite a mantra, and if that produced no good result, I should be fain to consider it as the finger of fate and quietly leave this body for another." These were the words of a man who is educated to a certain extent and very well read. When we pointed out that no gift of nature is aimless and that human teeth are all devouring, he answered by quoting whole chapters of Darwin's theory of natural selection and origin of the species. It is not true, he argued, that the first men were born with canine teeth. It was only in the course of time, with the degradation of humanity, only when the appetite for flesh and for flesh food began to develop, that the jaws changed their first shape under the influence of new necessities. I could not help asking myself, où la science va-t-elle se fuir? All right, I'll spell this for you. O-U, accent grave, L-A-S-C-I-E-N-I-C-E, V-A-T-E-F-O-U-R-R-E-R. I can't translate that. Où la science va-t-elle se fourrer? And I'm thinking maybe I'll stop here and continue with the next one. My goodness. That was certainly interesting. All right. Well, I hope you enjoyed it, and yes, come back soon.